and the continuous raising of this issue with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is a part of a phenomenon called ritual defamation. We were blessed to publish an article in the Final Call newspaper several weeks ago called Ritual Defamation. And so what has happened is that the enemies of Black America, who are the adversaries of Minister Farrakhan, have chosen to obfuscate the truth and have chosen to sidestep the grievances on behalf of Black America that Minister Farrakhan has raised by continuing to name call him and to engage in personal attacks, what is called in critical thinking ad hominem attacks. So basically, in order for them not to ever have to deal with any of the substantive critiques that Minister Farrakhan has raised against white America, against members of the Jewish community, they just simply involve themselves in name calling. And it's not difficult to understand. Many of us probably went through this when we were children. Sometimes when we may have been arguing against someone who didn't really have an argument to refute our argument, then that person allowed themselves to get involved in name calling. Sometimes in the hood, when a person doesn't have anything else to say, they will just lash out and say, your mama. And so the members of the Jewish community who continue repeatedly to label Minister Farrakhan as an anti-Semite is really kind of their way of saying your mama. We don't really have any way to refute your arguments. And in fact, we want to hide your arguments from the public. We want to keep your arguments and the evidence that you have lifted, primarily from Jewish sources, scholars, rabbis, and historians. We want to hide that from the general public so that the public can never realize that what you're saying actually has merit, is credible, and is a truth that should be dealt with, that helps to expose hidden hands that have had a primary role in what has become the Black Holocaust.
That's heavy. Now, when it comes to the ADL list, what is the importance of that ADL list? And whenever anybody stands out or stands up and criticizes the Jewish community, even when it's in truth and quoting their Jewish scholars, what is the importance of them making sure that they put you on that ADL hate list?
Well, whenever the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith list a person or a group as an anti-Semite, this is a signal to all who are in any kind of relationship with members of the Jewish community that this person who has been so dubbed anti-Semitic or anti-Semite is to be deprived of resources, to be considered persona non grata, and that is to be distanced from in the public. It is similar to having a scarlet letter A embroidered on your clothing. If we remember when we were growing up in grade school, we probably had to read that story called The Scarlet Letter. And in The Scarlet Letter, there was a woman who the townsfolk saw become pregnant. And she had actually become pregnant out of wedlock. And so in that time period, in order for her to become the object of public ridicule and scorn and shame, she was forced to place a scarlet or a red letter A on all of her garments so that wherever she went, her sins would follow her. And so people would shun her and wouldn't have anything to do with her. Otherwise, they would risk censure or they would risk losing their good standing in that society. So in the modern era, this is what the term anti-Semite is used for. It is used to scapegoat. It is used to marginalize and isolate anyone who is courageous enough to identify that there are members of the Jewish community who have been involved in wrongdoing as it relates to Black people in our history in America. When you begin to speak and to criticize, it doesn't matter the language that you use. It could be sweet language. It could be bombastic rhetoric. But whatever it may be, once you are labeled as an anti-Semite, then you become marginalized, you become isolated, and oftentimes as has been in the case of the Nation of Islam, economic opportunities are deprived of you. Some people will remember that many years ago, It was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan who had began a personal care product line called Clean and Fresh Products. He secured a $5 million loan from the North African state of Libya and our great brother Muammar Gaddafi. And Minister Farrakhan took the proceeds of that loan and deposited them in a black bank in Chicago. He had secured the participation of Mr. George Johnson of Johnson Hair Care Products. He had agreed to help Minister Farrakhan. But once it made the mainstream media that all of this was taking place and the minister began to be dubbed as an anti-Semite, Mr. Johnson had to come to the minister and say, "Brother Minister, I've been threatened. My distributors say I can manufacture as much product as I want, but if I help you, my product will sit and rot in warehouses because they won't distribute my product and I'll go out of business if I help you." A black bank, which we know by definition, if you're a black bank, you're a struggling bank. And yet a black bank was forced to turn down a $5 million deposit. And they called Minister Farrakhan and say, "Minister Farrakhan, please come and get your money because we can't receive it." And so all of this are the results of the minister and the nation being made or being made out to be a label anti-Semite. It has meant for black America that many of the plans and initiatives, many of the solutions that God revealed to the minister for the benefit of all of our people have been sabotaged as a result of the false charge of anti-Semitism. So in truth, Brother Ben, John and Jane Q. Public in black America probably don't even know what the term anti-Semite means. However, this is certainly not a case where ignorance is bliss, because the term anti-Semite has been used to hinder solutions coming to black America from the Nation of Islam.
Yes, sir. That takes me into one of my next questions. What is a Semite? So before we get into anti this and anti that, what actually is a true Semite? Can you break that down?
Yes, sir, my brother. The term Semite is a term used to describe an ethnic group of people. It is also a term used to describe a group of languages, and the people in the languages, by and large, are people of color, and they live in and around what is called today the Middle East or the ancient Near East. And so certainly most in the black community would be considered Semitic people or Semite people, even though in truth we are the original people of the planet. But to the extent that the definition for Semitic people includes people of color from that region of the world, we would also come under that description as well, many of us. And so what has happened over time is that that term has been co-opted. It has been weaponized